All right, do I have the papers of everybody who has a paper for me? Great. I have decided to record today just because I'm lazy. I don't have to set up my computer tomorrow if I do it today. And I have just more stuff to talk about than I know. I tried to color code my flags, and this is just not going to happen the way I think. But would you please open your reading guide to page 45? And I asked you to glance at these deeds of Augustus. Augustus is what Octavian is known to us as, has come down in history as, and it just means revered. If something's august, it means you're revered or respected. And and he had these inscribed in bronze tablets. And I asked you to go through them. Is there anything that stood out to anyone? Is there anything as you went through that you said, that's really interesting? Or why would someone want to be known for that? And if not, that's okay. Which with a little look means. I feel like you want to say something, Lauren, but no. Oh, you forgot to read. It's totally fine. I highlighted them for you. Okay, so here's just a couple of things I want to know. There's actually 35 of these, and I did not give you all 35 because it was a little repetitious. Yes. Well, perhaps. I mean, it's almost not any different than writing an autobiography. Do you know what I mean? You're probably going to spin yourself fairly good in an autobiography, but he also was the leader of pretty much the known world. And so I think he thought it was important to him to take note of what he thought was most important. Because, remember, he gets rid of Mark Antony and Cleopatra, and he's the sole ruler. And Rome has been fighting for decades. And it's war-torn. And the last guy who tried to take control alone got stabbed to death. So if I'm Augustus, first of all, I got to put the world back together somehow. We need peace. We cannot keep going on for another 60 years killing each other. But I need to be careful about how I do it so I don't get stabbed, right? I'm being kind of silly, but I'm sure this was in his mind. So he had to navigate very carefully. And so it's interesting, he put this government together. And we're going to talk about his successor, Tiberius, today. And he wants to make sure it lasts because it would be a bummer to have your whole life devoted to fixing this war problem and fixing this shattered government. The Republic ship has sailed. There's bribery is rampant. Tacitus at one place said, I think it's towards the beginning, there's no one alive at this point who remembers Republican government. Normal Republican government. They're all dead. And I built this system, says Augustus, and I want to make sure it lasts. So monuments like this, listing the things that are important, these are the things to focus on, people. These are my achievements. Maybe it will inspire the next emperor and the next emperor and the next emperor so things don't fall apart again. So I'm sure, Addison, totally sure pride had something to do with it. Absolutely sure. But I'm not sure it was just an ego trip. That he had reasons. And so he says, I'm just going to go through my highlights. I raised an army with which I set free the state. I put an end to war, to all of these opposite forces clamoring for power. They assigned me a place of a consul in the giving of opinions and gave me the imperium. Okay, I was like, okay, it's a bunch of words, I don't know. First of all, they gave me the place of a consul. the Senate said, Augustus, we're going to treat you like a consul even when you're not consul. All the powers that consuls have, we're going to give those to you too. And they gave me the imperium, power with an army. And you know, the power that generals have when they have an army, we're going to give that to you too. And they made me a triumvir for the settling of the state. Antony, Lepidus, Octavian. And then he says, I drove the men who slaughtered my father into exile. We're always a fan of getting revenge on the people who kill your family. Getting revenge. Then he says, when the dictatorship was offered to me, I did not accept it. When the annual and perpetual consulate was then again offered to me, I did not accept it. Remember Julius Caesar, I am now dictator for life. And people start stabbing him. Okay. It's like, no, Augustus, I don't need consulship for life. I don't need dictatorship for life. And then in number 6, he says, I received no magistracy, no public office, offered contrary to the customs of our ancestors. I wouldn't take anything that isn't a good Republican office. What the Senate then wanted to accomplish through me, I did through tribunician power. He's got the power of a tribune. Remember our tribunes? They stand up for the rights of the people, and they can veto anything the Senate wants to do. And we love the tribunes. They're all about raising up the downtrodden, right? And taking care of the poor and resettling people. Tribunes, love them. Augustus took the power of a tribune. Think about it. Now he can veto anything the Senate says. He can bring anybody up on charges. But I'm a tribune. I'm a tribune. It's a good Republican office. They fought hard to have tribunes. See, it all sounds very above board. He never calls himself emperor. That comes from the word imperium. I guess we can get rid of our Latin declensions, can't we? He calls himself princeps, which, like prince, okay, with the word prince, and it means first citizen. None of you are old, none of you read Animal Farm with me, because that was 3 years ago. Did you read Animal Farm? Oh, that's right. You know, all animals are equal, but some are more equal than others. Okay, so that's the idea that we're all equal. I'm just a little more equal than any of the rest of you. And so this government he set up, they call it the Principate, the lead under a princeps. But nobody stabbed me because I'm just a tribune who happens to have the power of a consul and imperium with an army, but I'm just first. And it sounds shady, but he had a decision to make. Okay, do I just restore the republic, full out republic, like the Livy Republic? Okay. Nobody alive remembers how that operates without bribery, greasing the wheels. And we are so used to, the nobility is so used to clamoring for position and fighting, that if I just turn it over to them, we're going to have civil war again. I know, as sure as I'm sitting here, that 2 or 3 of these guys are going to try to snatch power. They're going to start killing people again. On the other side, the people are so demoralized from just free food and free games. They don't even know how to vote anymore. They're not even capable of dealing with this anymore without just saying, give me a bribe and tell me who to vote for. The whole system is completely broken down. And Augustus says, I got to fix it because I love Rome. I don't want it to go down the tubes. But we can't turn the clock back. And I don't want to get stabbed to death, quite frankly. And so he's just walking a tightrope of how do I put this back together? I need to have a certain amount of power to keep people in check, to keep factions in check. But if I show off too much power, another Brutus is going to come for me. I've got to walk the tightrope. And this is the story of how he did that. Okay, so I'm just going to be first citizen with tribunician power. But on the second page, he has a lot of other things that he points out. Notice, I built, I rebuilt, I gave shows, I gave people spectacles. He also catered to some extent to the common people by giving them what they wanted, because he knew they'd rebel if he didn't. Hey, Isabella, come on in. Do you want to give her? The Johnsons brought everyone St. Nicholas Day gifts. All we've done so far, Isabella, is we're just talking about that res gestae, the list of the things that Augustus did, and we haven't done anything. 3 times I gave shows of gladiators. I gave the people hunts of African beasts. 3,500 beasts were killed. This is a lot of beasts. I gave the people the spectacle of a naval battle. You know, they used to fill stadiums with water and have flat out sea battles. Oh, I know. It must have been amazing that I approve of that sort of thing, but it must have been amazing. Can you imagine just flooding the Mark and putting ships in there, and they're ramming each other? It must have been just amazing. Okay. Yes. But the intent wasn't, I mean, it was inadvertent. It wasn't really battle to the death, I don't think. Maybe it was. I don't really remember. I also really like disaster movies. I just like the disaster part. Okay, I just fast forward through that part. I've only ever seen the Titanic sink. I don't really care about the rest of it. I just want to see the sinking part. Okay. So I'm notorious in my family for this. So these are the things that Augustus thought were important, right? That I was given power, but no power, no title that wasn't common in the Republic. I'm a tribune. I have consul power. I have imperium. And I'm going to give him a pass on all that. This was what had to happen to stop there from being factions killing each other in the streets. And he actually did it very well. Everyone loved Augustus. He was really very, very well liked because he was a good ruler. There was no proscription, blood in the streets, none of that, not under Augustus. Now, I'm not saying he didn't do some dodgy things morally, but he was a good ruler. So I'm having you read Tacitus's Annals, but we have another account of these emperors, and it's by a man named Suetonius. Suetonius wrote a book called, we know it as the 12 Caesars, and it starts with Julius Caesar? Yeah, and goes through Domitian, I think, so the whole 1st century. And it's very gossipy. It's like, what do the servants behind the scenes say about them? And it's little tidbits. It's kind of juicy, but some interesting information. And so I wanted to read, but before we talk about Tacitus's look at Augustus, I wanted to look at Suetonius's look at Augustus, okay, and some of the things that he's known for. Now, something that played really big in the sections about Germany, they kept talking about Varus and the legions. And I hope you got the impression, you at least gleaned from it, that there had been a big defeat of a large Roman army there, because it talked about Germanicus going and they could still see the bones bleaching because the bodies hadn't been buried. And it was terrible, terrible disaster. This happened under Augustus. And here's what Suetonius tells us. He, Augustus, suffered only 2 heavy and disgraceful defeats, both in Germany. The generals concerned being Lollius and Varus. Lollius's defeat was ignominious rather than of strategic importance. But Varus's nearly wrecked the empire, since 3 legions with their general and all their officers and auxiliary forces and the general staff were massacred to a man. When the news reached Rome, Augustus ordered patrols of the city at night to prevent any rising, then prolonged the terms of the provincial governors so that the allies should have men of experience whom they trusted to confirm their allegiance, right? Because they thought the Germans were coming for them next. They have just wiped out, legion's like 6,000. And that's not the auxiliary cohorts. 18,000 plus soldiers have just been wiped out in Germany. And they're scared. So he's upping the guards. He also vowed to celebrate games in honor of Jupiter greatest and best, as soon as the political situation improved. Similar vows had been made during the Cimbrian and Marcian wars. Indeed, it is said that he took the disaster so deeply to heart that he left his hair and beard untrimmed for months. He would often beat his head on the door, shouting, "Quintilius Varus, give me back my legions!" And always kept the anniversary as a day of deep mourning. This is the disaster that Germanicus goes back in Tacitus, and you can't undo a disaster like that, but gains back the ground and they had lost at that terrible, terrible defeat. Now, this comment of Suetonius goes along with all the times Augustus said, I built this, I built that, I built temples, I built. Aware that the city was architecturally unworthy of her position as capital of the Roman Empire, besides being vulnerable to fire and river floods, Augustus so improved her appearance that he could justifiably boast, I found Rome built of bricks. I leave her clothed in marble. The famous comment of Augustus, I found Rome a city of brick, but I left it a city of marble. Augustus is also known for trying to clean up families. What do I mean by that? Let me read this first. The existing laws that Augustus revised and the new ones that he enacted dealt with, among others, extravagance, adultery, unchastity, bribery, and the encouragement of marriage in the senatorial and equestrian orders. He gave people basically money incentives to get married, money incentives to have children. There were a lot of senators and knights who were just, like today, young men, I'm happy. I have more money if I'm not burdened with a family. I just want to have a good time. It's like, no. You owe your civilization descendants, people to carry on after us. And you need to just settle down and live a good, upright life and not be gallivanting around partying all the time. Settle down and get married. So, and he tried to crack down tremendously on adultery, which we don't consider I think there are states. Aren't there still states that have technically like adultery laws on the state statutes? We don't consider this a punishable by the state offense. We don't throw people in jail. It's not good. We don't throw people in jail for it. But they did in the past. They've considered it a punishable offense. The sad thing about Augustus was, though, that he tried so hard to do these things, but he had problems in his own family. First of all, it kind of takes away his credibility that he divorced his first wife, and then he married his second wife, Livia, while he took her from her husband. She was pregnant. I know, that's Livia. Livia, Tiberius's mother. Tiberius and his brother Drusus, that we hear a lot about Tacitus. So you might say, though, that this came back to haunt him, or what goes around comes around, because he had a daughter named Julia, and she became notorious for sleeping with anyone and everyone in the city of Rome, quite frankly. And he didn't know. And then it came to his attention, and he banished her. Banished her to an island. It's her dad. I mean, he's the ruler. He can't have people in his own family behaving that way when he's trying to reform the morals of Rome. But yet, It's his daughter, and he's never going to see her again. She is banished. And she lived out the rest of her life on a little island. I think there were like people to bring her food and stuff, but she didn't have to. It wasn't Survivor. She didn't have to go, hunt wild boars and eat coconuts. But yeah, no family. No, you're out, Julia. You're out. He was trying to do a good thing, but his family was not helping. We will talk more about his family as we look at Tacitus. Augustus proved assiduous in his administration of justice, often remaining in court until nightfall. And if he happened to be unwell, he would have his litter carried up to the tribunal. Let's carry my bed up there. I got a job to do. Sometimes he even judged cases from his sickbed in his house. As a judge, he was both conscientious and lenient. Once, to save a man who had obviously committed parricide from being sewn up in a sack. You're like, what? I got to read the footnote. Parricides, people who kill their fathers, were sewn up in a sack with a dog, a cock, a snake, and a monkey and cast into the river or sea. Well, that can't be pleasant. I think it would be unpleasant even before they threw you in the river or sea. Okay, to keep him from being sewn up in a sack, he is said to have asked the accused, I may assume, of course, that you did not kill your father. Innocent until proven guilty. Augustus's speeches in the House would often be interrupted by such remarks as, I don't understand you, or I dispute your point if I got the chance. And it happened more than once that, exasperated by recriminations which lowered the tone of the debates, he left the House in angry haste and was followed by shouts of, you ought to let senators say exactly what they think about matters of public importance. When every senator was required to nominate one other for the enrollment in the Reformed order, Antistius Labeo chose Marcus Lepidus, an old enemy of Augustus's, then living in exile. Augustus asked, surely there are others more deserving of this honor? Labeo answered, a man is entitled to have his own opinion. Yet Augustus never punished anyone for showing independence of mind on such occasions, or even for behaving insolently. Keep that in mind. You could say anything you wanted to Augustus. It's just words. It's like, well, I'm just first citizen. Can't really punish you for insulting me, being rude to me, arguing with me. You're entitled to your own opinion. Now I'm going to throw in one other thing that is just funny, and you won't laugh. Only I think this is funny. Suetonius tells us that Augustus had favorite figures of speech that he used. And apparently one of his favorite was if something happened quickly, his phrase was as quick as boiled asparagus. As quick as boiled asparagus. I feel like we should revive this, and that you should all go out into the world and just use this phrase. I've tried to start phrases before, and it never takes. People will never obey me. This is a statue of Augustus. I'm sorry, it's not a very good one. The top of his head is cut off. It was low resolution, and so I couldn't make it 8x10. It's called the Prima Porta Augustus because his wife Livia had a villa called the Prima Porta, and we found it there. So it's the Prima Porta Augustus. And from last year, do you remember what it means when there's a little prop? Do you remember talking about this? Like see how his leg is pressed against this little Cupid? I will tell you what it means. I'll remind you. It's copy. The original was bronze. And often when they made stone copies, they gave it extra props. So the weight of the stone didn't make it fall down. Stone is heavy, right? And bronze can be cast hollow and it's lighter. And so often if you see a statue and it's got his legs propped up against something, Like, oh, that was originally a bronze, and now it's in stone. So we think this is a copy. He's wearing a breastplate. He's wearing armor, and it's very decorative. You can kind of can you see enough that it's got figures inscribed on it. I'll pass it around. It's the return of standards that the Parthians had captured. Remember our friends the Parthians? Who killed Crassus, and everybody always goes and fights the Parthians. Here, you can take a look at it while I talk. And the Cupid down there propping up his leg is code for my family is descended from Venus. Remember, the Julian family descended from Iulus, son of Aeneas, whose mother is Venus. And so they supposedly traced their family history back to Venus and Cupid. So Cupid's like a cousin, like a really distant cousin of the Julian family. All right, let's take a look at Tacitus. I tried to color code. I feel like this is not going to work. So Suetonius gives you a pretty positive view of Augustus. Yeah, he did take a guy's wife and marry her, but he tried to do it. But this was, okay, I hate to say it, this was just kind of normally the way things were done. People did that sort of thing all the time. They did not consider it the way we consider it. But he was a good ruler who didn't mind people disagreeing with him. He's not going to throw you in prison because you argued with him. He's not going to post a list of people who are his enemies and he's going to kill them. And he did his best to revive the Republican offices, but still have enough power to not let war break out again. Right? That's the picture that Suetonius gives us. I feel like Tacitus gives us a slightly different picture. Tacitus, remember, was born way after all these people were dead. Tacitus wasn't born until 56, 57 AD. And Augustus died, I don't know, 18 AD, something like that. And the first question I asked you was, why didn't historians write about the reigns of Gaius, Claudius, and Nero during their lifetimes? And why is Tacitus doing it now? Why, Addison? Because they had regimes that were so harsh that you were in danger if you said anything negative. And obviously, Tacitus is insinuating, now the people who are emperors, I am not afraid of. We are not doing that anymore. And it also explains something that he harps on a lot. We saw the beginning of it in your reading this week. Trials for treason. Trials for treason, which we'll go back. We'll mention this again because I asked you a question about it. What does treason usually mean? Betraying your country. And under Tiberius, it turned into, you made a nasty joke about me. And I will bring you down. You don't want to write biographies of people who will kill you if you say anything that they don't like. And that's the way it was for a long time. But he says, whereas the accounts written after their deaths were influenced by still raging animosities. Even after they died, there were partisans, there was fear. But I shall write without indignation or partisanship. In my case, the customary incentives to these are lacking. I don't get anything good if I praise these guys. I don't get punished if I criticize them. They're dead. As a matter of fact, that whole family is gone. The Julio-Claudian family. It's Augustus, Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, Nero. All the same family. And it got worse and worse and worse. But Tacitus says, I'm free now. I can say what I think about these people because they're not in power anymore. Yes. That is a good question. It said he was consul in the year 97. So and Nero died in the 60s. So we're thinking 40 years after the last one died. So Tacitus would have been maybe 10 years old when Nero died. So if he's writing this later in life, this is decades old now. And he feels that he can safely do so. Now, I asked you to read between the lines a little bit on the next question. What does he think of Augustus's reign? Is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? Is he wicked? Is he misguided? Is he always right? He did seem to complain about him a lot. Did anybody want to add? Did anybody jot anything else down that you want to add to that? Let me read what he says here. He seduced the army with bonuses. All right, that right there, seduced the army. And his cheap food policy was successful bait for civilians. Okay, this is different than saying he kindly gave the army bonuses and he made sure no one went hungry in Rome, all right? Indeed, he attracted everybody's goodwill by the enjoyable gift of peace. Well, that's a good thing. Then he gradually pushed ahead and absorbed the functions of the Senate, the officials, even the law. Opposition did not exist. War or judicial murder had disposed of all men of spirit. He's implying no one stood up against him because everybody who had any guts is dead. And the people who are alive are wimps. Nobody was alive who had any spirit. Upper-class survivors found that slavish obedience was the way to succeed, both politically and financially. They had benefited from the revolution, and so now they liked the security of the existing arrangement better than the dangerous uncertainties of the old regime. Besides, the new order was popular in the provinces. There, government by Senate and people was looked upon skeptically as a matter of sparring dignitaries and extortionate officials. The legal system had provided no remedy against these, since it was wholly incapacitated by violence, favoritism, most of all, bribery. Tacitus never really says Augustus was a good guy. He never says Augustus was a bad guy. But can you hear how he insinuates? He absorbed all the powers. He baited the common people. He seduced the army. Tacitus is telling us something, but he's not saying it. He's insinuating it. Augustus had a daughter, Julia, I already said who, and she had sons Lucius and Gaius, and they both died young. And then she had another son, Agrippa Posthumus, and he, for unknown reasons, got banished also. And he had a son-in-law named Marcellus. Marcellus died. Marcellus was talked about in the Aeneid, if you remember, and he will be Marcellus. And Octavian's sister Octavia fainted when Virgil was reading it to her. Everybody that he wanted to put in charge after himself was dying, in other words. All his heirs were dying. But he married Livia, and Livia had two sons, Drusus and Tiberius. And it says Nero Drusus was long dead. Tiberius was the only surviving stepson, and everything pointed in his direction. I got to pick somebody to take over after I'm dead. And everybody's dying. And all I have left is this kid, Tiberius. Well, he wasn't. By the time Augustus died, he was a middle-aged man. But this adopted son of mine, the stepson, Tiberius. Here is, yes. I did. As a matter of fact, let's skip. Oh, I'm looking at the time, and let's skip ahead to this, because I just kind of wanted to read this. After Augustus died, Tacitus says there was a lot of discussion of his reign. A lot of people are discussing, was he a villain or was he the hero of the story? One opinion was as follows. Filial duty and a national emergency, in which there was no place for law-abiding conduct, had driven him to civil war. And this can be neither initiated nor maintained by decent methods. Octavian came to power, and Antony was gunning for him. Everybody was gunning for him. And you can't be a nice guy and win a civil war. You got to play dirty sometimes. So he did. He made many concessions to Antony and to Lepidus for the sake of vengeance on his father's murderers. When Lepidus grew old and lazy and Antony's self-indulgence got the better of him, the only possible cure for the distracted country had been government by one man. However, Augustus had put the state in order, not by making himself king or dictator, but by creating the Principate. The empire's frontiers were on the ocean or distant rivers. Armies, provinces, fleets, the whole system was interrelated. Roman citizens were protected by the law. Provincials were decently treated. Rome itself had been lavishly beautified. Force had been sparingly used, merely to preserve peace for the majority. Okay, so this is one view of Augustus. Yeah, he did some crummy things, but war is war. You got to do what you got to do. But all in all, everything's peaceful. And in fact, he initiated what we know as the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. Rome was not, I know we have attacks in Germany and he lost those legions, but basically Rome is at peace. And that Roman peace, skirmishes here and there, but basically peace, is going to last for a good long time. And it's also going to provide for the spread of the gospel. Paul can travel all over, the East unhindered. Stoned to death and dragged out of the town, but unhindered by travel hindrances, because the roads are good and they're safe and they're being patrolled by soldiers and the world is at peace. Travel is easy. People come and go. And if you happen to have word about Jesus and you want to spread that in the next town, it's easy to come and go. So we owe that to Augustus, bringing peace. So this is view number one. The opposite view went like this. Filial duty and national crisis had been merely pretexts. In actual fact, the motive of Octavian, the future Augustus, was lust for power. Inspired by that, he had mobilized ex-army settlers by gifts of money, raised an army. Well, he was only a half-grown boy without any official status, and won over a consul's brigades by bribery. I'm going to scoot down. In any case, it was he who took both their armies. He'd forced the reluctant Senate to make him consul. But the forces given him to deal with Antony, he used against the state. His judicial murders and land distributions were distasteful even to those who carried them out. And gossip did not spare his personal affairs. How he had abducted the wife of Tiberius Claudius Nero and asked the priests the farcical question whether it was in order for her to marry while pregnant. Then there was the debauchery of his friend Publius Vedius Pollio, but Livia was a real catastrophe to the nation as a mother and to the house of Caesars as a stepmother. Besides, critics continued, Augustus seemed to have superseded the worship of the gods when he wanted to have himself venerated in temples with godlike images by priests and ministers. His appointment of Tiberius as his successor was due neither to personal affection nor regard for the national interests. Thoroughly aware of Tiberius's cruelty and arrogance, he intended to heighten his own glory by the contrast with one so inferior. For a few years earlier, when Augustus had been asking the Senate to reward tribunes' powers to Tiberius, the emperor had actually let drop in a complimentary oration certain remarks about Tiberius's deportment, style of dressing, and habits. Ostensibly, these were excuses. In fact, they were criticisms. Even when Augustus died, people weren't sure what to make of him, in other words. Was he the hero or was he the villain? Did he take away our freedoms and our rights? Did he ruin the republic? Or did he save it in the only way he knew how? They hadn't decided. But because his potential heirs kept dying, he ended up with Tiberius to pass the baton to. And it says the new reign's first crime was the assassination of Agrippa Posthumus, the last possible descendant of Augustus, grandson of Augustus. They just sent soldiers to the island and they just killed him. And then Tiberius said, oh, I didn't give the order for that. Tiberius answered he had given no orders. This came to the notice of Tiberius's confidant, Crispus. It was he who had sent instructions to the colonel, and he was afraid that responsibility might be shifted to himself, in which case either telling the truth or lying would be equally risky. Do I say that Tiberius told me to have him killed? Tiberius won't like that. Do I say that he didn't tell me to have him killed? Then I look really guilty because I went and assassinated him without instructions. This was how Tiberius's reign began. We're not quite sure what to say or what to do because this guy, I just can't read him. He's so glum. Don't know if he's angry with me or not. It says, at Rome, consuls, senate, knights precipitately became servile. The more distinguished men were, the greater their urgency and insincerity. They must neither show satisfaction at the death of one emperor, nor gloom at the accession of the other. So their features were carefully arranged in a blend of tears and smiles, mourning and flattery. We don't want to look happy, because then he'll say, are you happy my stepfather's dead? But we don't want to look sad, because he'll say, were you sad that I'm emperor now? We have to be very careful. Tiberius, so they offered, the Senate had to offer Tiberius all the stuff that Augustus had. You can be consul, and you can have tribunician power, and you can be father of the country. Tiberius just kept saying, no, I don't want any power. No, I don't deserve that. It says, Tiberius pretended to be hesitant for another reason too, in order to detect what leading men were thinking. Every word, every look, he twisted into some criminal significance and stored them up in his memory. I wrote a note to myself later. It says, exhausted by the general outcry and individual entreaties, he gradually gave way. Not to the extent of admitting that he accepted the throne, but at least to the point of ceasing to be urged and refuse. Nobody knew what to do with Tiberius. Let's talk about him for a minute. Tiberius had been forced by his family to divorce his wife. He loved her. Oh, I don't know if I'm going to have time for this or not. You guys are going to have to bear with me, so that we don't think too evilly of Tiberius. Tiberius married Vipsania Agrippina, daughter of Augustus's admiral Marcus Agrippa and granddaughter of Caecilius Atticus. It proved a happy marriage, but when Vipsania had already borne him a son, Drusus, whose paternity he acknowledged, and found herself pregnant again, he was required to divorce her and hurriedly marry Augustus's daughter, Julia. Tiberius took this very ill. He loved Vipsania and strongly disapproved of Julia, realizing, like everyone else, that she had felt an adulterous passion for him while still married to his father-in-law Agrippa. Tiberius continued to regret the divorce so heartily that when one day he accidentally caught sight of Vipsania and followed her with tears in his eyes and intense unhappiness written on his face, precautions were taken against his ever seeing her again. He ran into, saw her in public one day. He just started crying and following her around. Why? His family said, no, we need you to marry her. That's your wife. Yeah, yes, because he was married to the daughter of Agrippa, and Agrippa was married to Julia, and then Agrippa died, and so now he's marrying the woman who used to be married to his father-in-law. Oh, it's very twisted, Addison. Second with me. And as far as we can tell, Tiberius just never really wanted any of this. Just leave me alone. I'm quiet, I'm moody, I'm an introvert. I don't want to deal with any of this. But all the other potential heirs kept dying. And he had fought. Did you notice Tacitus mentioned when he was talking about Germany, Germanicus was pep talking them with, and you're Tiberius's legions, and you fought with Tiberius. Tiberius was not bad on the battlefield. They sent him to Germany to fight the German tribes rushing into the empire. He did it. He did his job. But he got so disgusted with Julia, who ended up getting banished, he just went for a while to the island of Rhodes, and he just stayed for 7 years. He just left Rome. Like, I'm done. I'm so done with all of you people. I'm retiring from public life. Just no forwarding address. But the other people kept dying. So finally they begged him to come back. I don't think Tiberius ever wanted to do this job. But unfortunately, when he got the job, he didn't do it very nicely. Now, in my color coding, blue means something good about Tiberius. So let's just look at the very few blues. Here are some things that Tacitus says in his favor. About this time, a junior senator named Aurelius Pius protested that his house had been undermined by the government's construction of a road and aqueduct. He appealed to the Senate. The praetors in charge of the treasury resisted the claim, but Tiberius came to his help and paid him the value of his house. We were doing road work and they ruined your house. By golly, we'll pay you for it. For the emperor was prepared to spend in a good cause and kept this good quality long after his others were gone. Right? He doesn't mind, he's fair. It says about elections to consulships. I hardly venture to make any definite statement. I am Tiberius and I am emperor, and I could just tell you, those two guys are going to be consuls. Make those two guys consuls. He could, but he didn't. He would hint. He would nudge them, like it would be good for these guys to be consuls. But he never ordered them to elect anyone. He didn't abuse his power that way. This is another good thing we can say about him. In the same year, 12 famous cities in the province of Asia were overwhelmed by an earthquake. Its occurrence at night increased the surprise and destruction. There are stories of big mountains subsiding, flat ground rising high in the air, conflagrations bursting out among the debris. Sardis suffered worst and attracted most sympathy. Tiberius promised it 10 million sesterces and remitted all taxation by the treasury or its imperially controlled branches for 5 years. Government relief, disaster relief, instantly. No taxes for you guys. It says he refused to accept any bequests which he had not earned by friendship. You know, under the empire, it was very popular to leave everything to the emperor in your will, especially if you think the emperor might not like you and your family very much, because then he will like you and he'll leave your heirs alone, And he won't try to take your money from them because he has the money already. Now, it's a bummer for your heirs, obviously, because they don't get anything, but it was considered a safeguard. Tiberius wouldn't take the money unless he personally knew you. In other words, you left me this money because you care about me. It's not a power play or political ploy. Because with later emperors, just everybody, every Tom, Dick, and Harry was just leaving all their money to the emperor. The later emperors would take it. They would take it all. And Tiberius like, no, I don't need your money unless I think that you gave it to me for personal reasons, not for political reasons. And finally, he still rejected the title Father of his country, which was not offered him again because of this. He also severely reproved the people who spoke of his occupations as divine and himself as master. So the paths of speech were narrow and slippery. For though the emperor dreaded freedom, he detested flattery. All right, that's all my blues. That's the sum total of the good that I have to say about Tiberius. So in the chapter 2 section, why did the army start rebelling? Oh, and by the way, do you guys know that there are maps in the back of your book? So Pannonia is just across from Italy. Here on page 419, here's Italy and Pannonia right across. So if they're talking about places and you want to see, there are also family trees. So you can see who's married to who and who their kids are. I don't expect you to study the family trees, but if you're just curious, they're back there, okay? So why did this Pannonian army just suddenly decide to rebel when Augustus died? It says mutant. Oh, do it say? Oh, yeah, go for it.
Well, that they wanted better conditions in the army and they were old, and so they wanted to
retire. Okay, I have been in this army for decades. I'm like walking with a cane. Are you ever going to let me go? And so that's what they wanted. They wanted better conditions. They chose this time, and it says, there were no fresh motives except that the change of emperors offered hopes of rioting with impunity and collecting the profits afforded by civil wars. This had never happened. This moment had never happened before. The emperor died and there's a new emperor. Because Julius Caesar's assassination doesn't count. That wasn't a clean, I'm handing power over to you. This was the first time they'd ever tried to do this. And these soldiers said, this is a marvelous time to mutiny. He's worried, like a lot of people don't like Tiberius. Everything's a mess in Rome. He's got to deal with stuff there. He doesn't have time to deal with us. This is a good time to mutiny and press our case. And yes, they wanted shorter service. They wanted bonuses. They wanted to be settled on land. They just wanted decent treatment. They did sign up to be soldiers, but I don't know that they signed up to be soldiers till they were dead. Except dead in battle. You know what I mean? Till they were old. And they wanted better conditions. So it sort of went on strike, but it was worse than that because they were killing some of their commanders, we find out. They sent the general's son to Rome to give their demands. I'm actually going to skip that. And so Tiberius sent his son Drusus to deal with it and calmed down that outbreak. I think I'm just going to kind of breeze over that outbreak because you read about it. It's pretty straightforward. The army in Germany now also rebels. Same reasons. Better pay, fewer years of service. This is a good time because things are unsettled in Rome. And Tiberius sent Germanicus. All right. Germanicus, it says, was married to his granddaughter Agrippina and had several children by her. since he was the son of Tiberius's brother Nero Drusus, and one of his grandparents was the Augusta. The Augusta is Livia, Augustus's widow. So Germanicus's wife, her grandpa is Augustus. Germanicus's ancestor is Augustus's wife. But they're not related to each other, because of multiple marriages. All right. So feels like everybody should love him. He's a member of our family. Yet Germanicus suffered from the fact that his grandmother and uncle hated him for reasons which were unfair but all the more potent. For Nero Drusus still lived on in Roman memories. It was believed that if he had obtained control of the empire, he would have brought back the free republic. All right. Germanicus's dad, Drusus, Tiberius's brother, everybody loved him. Everybody loved him. So do you know what? If it had been him, he would have given us all our freedom and brought back the republic. But he died. The Augusta, Livia, had a stepmother's aversion to Agrippina. Livia hates Germanicus's wife. They hate these two. But the people love them. Germanicus is young and handsome. He's competent, he's capable. Tiberius has adopted him, meaning Germanicus will be my heir. And Tiberius feels like maybe they like him better than me. I think they're just waiting for me to die so Germanicus can take over. In the meantime, Livia, Tiberius's mother, is hating on Germanicus's wife, Agrippina. She wasn't a quiet, demure wife at home. She put herself out there, and she made enemies. So they get sent to Germany. They arrive in the camp. They almost threaten Germanicus's life. Germanicus says, if you want to kill me, just kill, I'll just kill myself. And like, here, take my knife, it's sharper. Till finally, and his family is there with him. This is nothing about Agrippina. They have 5 kids, I think. Twice in this book it says, and she gave birth. Like, she's hugely pregnant and traveling around with toddlers and going to the camps in Germany. And things are so out of hand that Germanicus says, you know what, I need to send my wife and children away. I'm going to give them to a Gaulish tribe that are allies. And I asked, what did this do? What effect did the dismissal of Germanicus's wife and young son have on the mutineers? How did it make them feel? I can't believe I have become a monster if my dear general's wife, Agrippina, and those cute little kids feel threatened by me. There was her baby son, Gaius, born in the camp and brought up with the regular troops as his comrades. In their army fashion, they had nicknamed him Little Boots, Caligula, because as a popular gesture, he was often dressed in miniature army boots. So cute. But their jealousy of the Treveri, the Gallic tribe, was what affected them most. Germanicus gets up and chews them out. I do not know what to call this gathering. You men who have used your fortifications and weapons to blockade your emperor's son can hardly be called soldiers. Citizen is not the name for people who cast aside the authority of the Senate. The divine Julius suppressed a mutiny by one word. When his men would not take the oath, he called them civilians. The divine Augustus put fear into his troops at Actium by a look. I cannot compete with them, but I am their descendant. He wins them over, and he puts down the rebellion. Now, you would think that Tiberius would be elated, right? Yay, the armies are no longer rebelling. Good for you, Germanicus. But it says Tiberius's reaction to German developments included worry as well as relief. He was glad the mutiny had been put down, but he was not pleased that Germanicus had courted the army's goodwill by money payments and accelerated discharges, not to speak of his military success. He gave them what they asked for. But worse, as far as Tiberius is concerned, he looks good. Everybody likes him. Everybody likes him, and they don't like me. Germanicus goes on, Tacitus tells us, to go and get back some of those lost standards from Varus's legions. He marches through the marshes where all those 18,000 men plus got killed. On the open ground were whitening bones, scattered where men had fled, heaped up where they had stood and fought back. Fragments of spears and horses' limbs lay there, also human heads fastened to tree trunks. In groves nearby were the outlandish altars at which the Germans had massacred the Roman colonels and senior company commanders. And Germanicus, against all odds, conquers those Germans, gets his army out of swamps, decides to take them by ship in the North Sea, around the coast, the northern coast of France. But at certain times of year, the North Sea can be very, very stormy. His ships get scattered, he loses guys shipwrecked on islands, and he managed to get his fleet back together and go around and rescue the guys who've gotten scattered. He's covered in glory. It says, the emperor interpreted every action of Germanicus unfavorably. Every time he does something good and successful, Tacitus says he hates it. Agrippina is still there with him. You know, she didn't leave because the soldiers said they were sorry and they killed the ringleaders of the rebellion. It says she stood at the bridgehead to thank and congratulate the returning column. She's at the army camps. Good job when they come back in. This made a profound impression on Tiberius. There was something behind these careful attentions to the army, he felt. They were not simply because of the foreign enemy. The commanding officer's job, he reflected, is a sinecure when a woman inspects units and exhibits herself before the standards. As though it were not pretentious enough to parade the commander's son around in private soldier's uniform and propose to have him called Little Boot Caesar. Agrippina's position in the army already seemed to outshine generals and commanding officers, and she, a woman, had suppressed a mutiny, which the emperor's own signature had failed to check. Lucius Aelius Sejanus aggravated and intensified his suspicions. Sejanus is a guy we're going to meet again. He ends up being the commander of the Praetorian Guard, the emperor's personal guard. He knew how Tiberius's mind worked. Inside it, for the eventual future, he sowed hatreds. They would lie low, but would one day bear fruit abundantly. I feel like I have just answered the next question, or the second question. What is Tiberius's attitude toward Germanicus? Have I sufficiently expressed to you that he does not like him, construes everything he does negatively? He just wants people to like him. Well, I'm in charge. Won't they like me? And at this point, it says he revived the treason law. This is what I mentioned at the beginning of our class. I asked you what were treason laws originally meant to address. You told me overthrow of the state, attack on the state. The ancients had applied it to official misconduct, betrayal of an army. But Tiberius starts using it for insults. It starts off slow, right? It says, Philanius was charged first with admitting among the worshippers of Augustus an actor in musical comedies made Cassius, who was a male prostitute, and with disposing of a statue of Augustus when selling some garden property. Augustus is now a god, you know. He's the divine Augustus. And you sold his statue. I'm not allowed to do that? You invited that lowlife to the worship of Augustus. I'm not allowed to do that? No, you're not. Everyone of any eminence was in danger from him. All right. Let me see if I can. My color coding is not working for me. I'm sorry. I wanted to skip up. Oh, here. Okay. Oh, I didn't have a color meaning treason. All right. Hold on. I want to skip up to more treason. Okay? Hang on. Actually, let's go up to chapter 4. All right. It was now that Marcus Scribonius Libo Drusus was accused of subversive plotting. This poor guy, Libo, what did you write down for why he was put on trial? Subversive plotting. Anything in particular? It says, I asked you, were the charges legitimate or serious? It says, Libo was a fatuous young man with a taste for absurdities. One of his friends interested him in astrologers' predictions, and Catus reminded Libo that the Caesars were his cousins. In other words, this is dimwit, Libo. And he has a friend who's goading him on, you're in that family too. Maybe you could consult the astrologers and find out if you're going to be powerful someday. Vibius announced he would take the charges one by one, and he produced the documents. They were preposterous. Here's what this man is charged with. In one, Libo asked a fortune teller if he would become rich enough to pave the Via Appia with money as far as Brundusium. Am I ever going to be rich? Okay, pave the whole road with money. Other stupidities were equally pointless. Indeed, if indulgently regarded, pitiable. But in one paper, mysterious or sinister marks against the names of imperial personages and senators were alleged by the prosecutor to be in Libo's handwriting. Libo denied this. But slaves identified his hand, and it was decided to interrogate them under torture. Since, however, there was an ancient senatorial decree forbidding such investigations of slaves, Tiberius ordered the slaves to be sold individually to the treasury agent, just so that they could torture them to get evidence against him. All he did was say some stupid stuff at dinner parties and supposedly had a paper in his possession with the names of people in the imperial family and little marks next to some of them, which could mean anything. Invite them to my next party. Send a Christmas gift. And they charged him with treason. This is a model case of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people under Tiberius who were just brought up on charges and strongly suggested to commit suicide before you get convicted. If I'm on trial and they haven't convicted me of anything yet, technically I'm still innocent. And if I die then, my family can have my stuff and there's no disgrace connected with me. But if I wait till I'm convicted, there is disgrace and they will take all my stuff. So I'll just kill myself. This is Tiberius. Oh, let me finish him off. Yeah, it says he stabbed himself twice in the stomach and fell moaning. And of course, the next day they opened the trial, and Tiberius is like, oh, if you just waited, we probably would have found him innocent. I never would have punished him for things like that. And then a bunch of people wanted to give thanks and have parades and festivals for the saving of Rome. Tiberius, you were saved. Wasn't saved from anything. I have listed these distinguished proposers and their servilities to show how long ago this national disgrace started. That we kill people, we strongly suggest people die, based on nothing. And then we just over the top celebrate, oh, Rome has been saved from a terrible danger. And Tiberius went along with it. So, while he's in the middle of trying people in court for insulting him, Germanicus is covered in glory in Germany. And Tacitus says, the people, in the name of Germanicus, the emperor distributed 300 sesterces a head to the population, but people did not believe his affection was sincere. Next, he decided to find honorable excuses for the young man's elimination. Now, that sounds like death, and maybe it does mean that. We don't know. In the East, there's a problem. A group in the East, Armenians, have gotten rid of their king, and they want to put a new king in. There's kind of a Roman puppet. Germanicus, go east and take care of it. Germanicus says, but I'm one more year in Germany and I'll have it all. No, you've done enough. You've done enough. You're done in Germany. Go east. We need you in the East. So he takes his family with him. But before he goes, a guy named Piso has been made governor of Syria. Okay, am I in chapter 5 yet? No, I'm not yet. Well, I am. I'm going to get there soon. Piso was certain that the purpose of his Syrian appointment was the repression of Germanicus's ambitions. According to one view, he received secret instructions from Tiberius. You go, you watch Germanicus. Make sure he doesn't get too big for his britches. Ruin things for him.
Was Syria part of Rome?
Yes. Yes. And part of the area that Germanicus has been given blanket control over. So technically, Piso is supposed to be under Germanicus. And I noted this comment. Camillus was voted an honorary triumph and lived so unassumingly that he survived it. What does he mean? Camillus was a general in Africa, put down a rebellion, and they gave him a triumph, and he lived so unassumingly that he survived it. Why might you get honors and not survive in Rome? What might happen to you in this Rome, the Rome we're talking about right now, with Tiberius in charge? Jealousy. You come back covered in glory? Tiberius doesn't like that. Don't draw attention to yourself, or you'll end up on trial with a highly recommended suicide. Camillus was voted an honorary triumph and lived so unassumingly that he survived it. Didn't make a big deal out of it. Didn't make a show. So I'm just going to be a private person now. Don't want any glory. Got to be careful. Because Tacitus goes on to say that somebody else was called to court for speaking insultingly about the divine Augustus, as well as about Tiberius and his mother. Yes, indeed. Indeed. All right. So, Piso goes east as governor, and he just lets everything go. He lets the soldiers do whatever they want. All discipline gone. Nothing. And just apparently to make it harder on Germanicus. And Germanicus shows up and starts undoing what Piso has done, and Piso will not obey him. I'm sorry, I'm distracted because I'm looking for a particular comment about Tiberius's mother, and I've gone past it, so I'm not going to be able to find it. Germanicus fixes everything. He puts the new king on the throne of Armenia. Everything's fine. Everybody loves him. He decides to travel to Egypt. Just take a little tour, like vacation, sightseeing tour. See the sights of Egypt. Tiberius is angry because, oh, you're not supposed to go in Egypt without permission from the emperor. It's an imperial province. He didn't mean any harm. And he got sick. He started to get really sick. Germanicus fell ill. When the news came that the prince was better and vows offered for his recovery, Piso sent his attendants to disperse the rejoicing crowds of Antioch with their sacrificial victims and apparatus. When Germanicus started getting better, people started publicly sacrificing and partying in the streets, and Piso's like, go home. Germanicus had a relapse, aggravated by his belief that Piso had poisoned him. Examination of the floor and walls of his bedroom revealed the remains of human bodies, spells, curses, lead tablets inscribed with the patient's name, charred and bloody ashes, and other malignant objects, which are supposed to consign souls to the powers of the tomb. At the same time, agents of Piso were accused of spying on the sickbed. And it got worse than he died. He died in Antioch. But before he died, Tacitus says he took his friends and his wife Agrippina by the hand and said, right this wrong. You know who did this. I've just ruined that question, haven't I? Right. You know who did this. Piso did this, and his wife Plancina. And after he dies, Piso has to decide whether to go to Rome and answer for what he's done or just go take over the province again, even though it doesn't belong to him. And his friend tells him, you have the Augustus complicity, the emperor's sympathy, secretly. No one is so delighted by Germanicus's death as its most ostentatious mourners. Plancina, it seems, had a close lady friend named Martina. Martina was a known poisoner. She provided poison. That is her job. And she's besties with Plancina, who's married to Piso. They come back to Rome, all of them eventually. They bring Germanicus's body back, and his brother Claudius comes out. Would be like his brother-in-law Drusus comes out. Who does not come out? Tiberius, Livia. They don't come out. He's the heir apparent of the Roman Empire. Everybody loves him. Like, They said, we're just too broken up by grief to come out. People are like, yeah, they don't want anybody to see him smiling. That's why they don't come out. And they put Piso on trial for insubordination, but also for poisoning. And the trial's going, he thinks okay, because he thinks he's got an ace in the hole. Okay, now I'm speculating. Okay, now we got to read Suetonius. Hang on. Oh, no. Where is it? Xenia. Oh, I didn't mark that place. Okay, never mind. All is well. I'll read it out of here. Testa says, I remember hearing older men speak of a document, often seen in Piso's hands. He never made it known. But his friends insisted that it contained a letter from Tiberius with instructions relating to Germanicus. This is all we know. But people started wondering, I wonder if Tiberius wrote to him and told him to poison Germanicus. I wonder if he's got a smoking gun right there in his hand. But he doesn't want to use it unless he has to. So the trial goes on, starting to look a little iffy for Piso. And then one day his wife comes home from the trial and says, you know, sweetie, I've decided to get my own lawyer. Because she wants to distance herself from him. This is a bad sign when your wife doesn't want to share the same legal representation. And he goes and he thinks Tiberius is going to say something. He's going to let him off the hook. He's going to give him a little smile, something. And Tiberius is just stone face. Piso knows he's in trouble. And he kills himself. He kills himself. In fact, Tacitus says soldiers were sent to his house to guard him. The next morning he's dead. He doesn't show up for court. I can't believe I didn't put a flag at it. But Tacitus strongly suggests that Tiberius and Livia had Germanicus poisoned. And he also, I have to go through tonight and find the spot and put a flag there. He insinuates that Gaius and Lucius and Marcellus and Nero Drusus and all these people who kept dying. Remember I told you at the beginning that everybody who was next keeps dying, that it wasn't an accident. We don't know. But about 80 years ago, there was a classicist, a guy who studies the classics named Robert Graves. And he used Tacitus and Suetonius to write novels. They're fictionalized, okay? But they're all stuff that Suetonius and Tacitus hint. And he wrote 2 books. The first one was called I, Claudius, and the second one was called Claudius the God. And in these books, the Emperor Claudius is writing his memoirs, and he's looking back at his childhood and all the things that have happened. And in these novels, they're just novels, okay? They're fictionalized. Livia decided her son Tiberius was going to be the next emperor, by golly, and we will get rid of anybody who's in the way. So little Gaius Caesar and Lucius Caesar die. And Agrippa Posthumus gets sent off to an island and then gets murdered the moment Augustus dies. And then Livia's own son, Drusus, dies mysteriously. What did Tacitus tell us? Oh, people thought that if Drusus had been in charge, he would bring back the republic. Can't have an emperor if there's a republic. It's fascinating. Then they made a TV show out of it, which I love, called I, Claudius. And that's the premise, that Livia poisoned everyone. so that Tiberius could be the next emperor. We do not know that this is true. We do not know that this is not true. It does seem like everybody who was going to be emperor next seemed to die until only Tiberius was left. It's kind of like a soap opera, you know? When you start reading Tacitus and Suetonius, it gets a little, we just hate members of our family and we don't like them getting any glory. So if you think Tiberius is already kind of questionably rotten, wait till you read chapters 6 through 8, which is what you're going to read for this week, because it gets worse, if that is even possible. Remember Sejanus. I mentioned Sejanus. I don't know if it's in chapter 6 through 8, but he's going to pop up again. Tiberius, Suetonius tells us, as soon as he knew Augustus was dead, you know, he's like, oh, I don't know if I need this power, that power, but I'll tell you one power he took immediately. He took a Praetorian guard. He took soldiers to guard himself. I want a guard. And Sejanus was the leader of the guard. And apparently Sejanus did a very good job of whispering suspicions in Tiberius's ear and leading him around. Patrick Stewart played Sejanus. So I always picture Patrick Stewart's face when I say him. Read chapters 6 through 8, and I would like you to write a summa. One paragraph, 250 to 300 words. And it is this fascinating comment. Especially thinking about what I just insinuated, that Tacitus insinuates. It says, some days later, Tiberius recommended the Senate to admit Publius Vitellius, Quintius Brennus, and Quintus Serveus to the pontifical order. These were the guys who were they're prosecuting Piso. In other words, he gave them, just here, take a nice office, take a little bribe, just keep your mouth shut. Contradictory rumors have raged about it among contemporaries and later generations alike. Here's the thing. Important events are obscure. Important events are obscure. Some believe all manner of hearsay evidence, others twist truth into fiction, and both sorts of error are magnified by time. I want you to think about that. Important events are obscure, hidden. The most important things that happen in history, we don't know. They're not out there on the headlines, front page, Google News. They're buried in the background. But after years pass, maybe centuries, they bubble up and you know, this was the most important thing. And nobody paid attention to it at the time. I want you to tell me, what does he mean? Do you agree? And can you think of any examples of something that seemed hidden, unimportant, nothing, who cares? And it later turned out to be a big deal. In fact, maybe the main event of everything that was going on then, and nobody knew. Important events are obscure. All right? One paragraph. Tell me what you think he means. Tell me if you can think of any examples. And you are free to say, no, I don't agree at all. I think all important events are out there in plain sight. You may disagree with Tacitus if you want, and there will be no treason trials here. All right? Thank you. We meet one more week, and then we have Christmas break. What? No, we have one more. Yes. It is okay. The Scole group only has one more. This week is their last week. But maybe you guys, maybe because you switched over, I do 32 weeks. It's not 30 weeks, it's 32 for me. That's okay. That's okay. But are you going to be here? No. All right, that's fine. Just watch the video. I'll record it. I'll record today's. It's fine. Don't sweat it. All right. I'm sorry for the mix-up. No. It's okay. All right, I'll shut this off. Yeah, I'm